Okay, so let's talk about Section 1 of the Sherman Antitrust Act. And under Section 1, we want to bifurcate into um, two separate types of violations. The first being your per se violation. And per se means in and of itself or by itself. And these violations are really when we find these types of agreements, contractual agreements, and when we say contractual, it really doesn't have to be a written contract. It can be a handshake agreement or um, any indication that you're acting in concert with another company, be it supplier or um, competitor. All right. And so price fixing. Price fixing is the most common per se violation. And this is um, you're going to sell at this price and I'm going to sell very close to it or at the same price. And since we control the market, we both make more money as opposed to competition, which drives your cost down, drives my cost, or actually drives your price down and drives my price down, and we both make less money. All right. But the problem with that is that it's illegal price fixing. Um, and it's a fine line because you can't agree to do it, but companies can do it in practice and say, well, we're not going to lower our price and we'll see what the competition does or doesn't do. And that's perfectly legal, right? There, that may fall under other areas of antitrust, which we'll get to, but it wouldn't fall as a per se violation of Section 1. All right. Group boycotts is very similar here. Um, Multiple market players cannot agree to take the same action and not support the same business, the same supplier. All right. Um, Ford and General Motors can't agree to not buy um, automotive components from Johnson Controls because they feel that Johnson has become too powerful. Right. That would be a group boycott. All right. Also, a per se violation. And the market division really is kind of dividing and conquering. Right. You do business on the east side of town, I'm going to do business on the west side of town. And I'm not going to do business on your side, you don't do business on my side. And that way we both have an established customer base. Problem with that is that's a per se violation of Section 1 of the Sherman Antitrust Act. Also, it doesn't have to be geographic, it can be by age, class, or really any way of dividing the market is a per se violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, which allows for prosecution in federal court. All right. Rule of reason. So the idea with rule of reason is that these claims are more difficult to make um, in court because there are factors that you have to consider. Whereas per se violation, if um, it's proved that I'm fixing prices or acting with another competitor to boycott, um, I'm liable. Whereas other actions not listed as per se fall under the rule of reason. All right. Um, Under Section 1, we're still looking at basically contractual agreements. So we have to look to the purpose of the contractual agreement. Is there a relevant purpose? Um, the party's ability to implement the agreement to achieve that purpose, the effect of the agreement on competition, which is probably the most important of the factors, and is there a less restrictive means to achieve that same purpose? All right, so those are your rule of reason factors. And so if you want to think of like exclusionary contracts, um, where one party, by signing a contract, agrees to buy all of its needs of a particular commodity from one supplier. those contracts are analyzed under the rule of reason, right? Because obviously, if I've agreed to buy all of my goods from one particular supplier, that would exclude me doing business with any of the competition, right? And those are examined under the rule of reason, all right? And obviously, that's a much more complex court case, a much more complex litigation process because you have to prove that uh, that there wasn't another less restrictive agreement that could have achieved the same purpose. All right. Let's talk about horizontal versus vertical restraints on trade. All right. So when we think of a horizontal restraint on trade, um, this is if I am a retailer and I go and buy the competition. All right. And let's say I keep doing that to the point where I control 80 or 90% of the market share. All right. Um, that's a horizontal restraint on trade, right? And if I control that, then um, there's liability under the Section 1 of the Sherman Antitrust Act. Also, the things previously mentioned, price fixing, group boycotts, market division, those are typically done as horizontal restraints on competition, i.e., between competitive retailers or sellers of goods. Let's talk for a minute about trade associations, right? And whether you're aware or not, you're aware of trade associations. They're very common in agriculture, all right? So, good chance you've got some ocean spray juice, in your fridge, or you've consumed some at some point in time. Well, that's an example of a trade association. So, Ocean Spray is a cooperative created for the benefit of independent cranberry growers, right? So, prior to that cooperative, um, because in agriculture, oftentimes the bigger farms are um, sophisticated enough to bring their own product to market and have the ability to set their price. But not every crop lends itself to that economy of scale. And one such is cranberry growers, right? They're not typically huge mega farms. They're typically smaller independent growers. And the problem with that is if they bring their product to market, that competition, that there's many, many small market players, will drive the price of their products down because they're going to bid against each other. Enter Ocean Spray Cooperative, and as a result, it serves as an intermediary, the trade association, so the growers sell their product to Ocean Spray, who then brings all the product to market. Uh, and as a result, they're not bidding against each other to drive the price down. Okay, so trade associations exist with um, wide degree of latitude, but if they become too effective, that they represent or possess monopoly power, then that falls under uh, Section 1 of the Sherman Antitrust Act. And actually, this type of arrangement is relatively common in agriculture. There are other industries, but the best examples that I think of are agriculture. Obviously the Ocean Spray Cooperative, the Florida Orange Growers Association is also a similar cooperative that operates much in the same way. Okay, and joint ventures, you may remember that from 2080, and we'll actually revisit that in the next unit as well. It's a partnership. Partnership law applies. It's an agreement between two companies to do something, right? And if they do something that's anti-competitive, it may fall under Section 1 of the Sherman Antitrust Act. All right, let's talk about vertical restraints. So if horizontal is among multiple retailers per se, or multiple wholesalers, or multiple parties at any level, it can be multiple manufacturers as well, multiple parties at any level in the supply chain. Vertical restraints are up and down the supply chain. All right, so if one company, and we can use an automotive example here, um, doesn't control all of the retail automotive, say General Motors, but they do control all of the, let's say, capacity to manufacture transmissions. Well, any vehicle you bring to market is presumably going to need a transmission if it's an internal combustion engine. Let's ignore electric cars for the moment. Any vehicle is going to need a transmission. And so if General Motors owns all the productive capability of manufacturing transmissions, that's a vertical restraint, because even though I don't control all of the market share, there's still other auto manufacturers, say Ford or Chrysler, um, or Dodge. If I control transmission, that means all my competitors have to buy from me, and I can use that in an anti-competitive manner. Right? So that's an example of a vertical restraint on trade. And those can be treated and can be found to be a violation, just like any horizontal restraint. A few other examples: territorial or customer restrictions. Um, these are analyzed under the rule of reason. And resale price maintenance agreements, they used to be scrutinized much heavier than they are now. Um, to be quite frank, businesses are given wide latitude to control the pricing of their products, right? And it takes an awful lot for that to be deemed anti-competitive, right? And this was really pioneered with um, it was Nintendo Entertainment System that did this. Um, and they called it, I remember it used to cost $99.99, and that was what it sold for, right? And if a retailer decided to sell theirs for $98, they were legally obligated to do so, but Nintendo ceased to do business with them going forward, right? And that type of agreement does hold up under the Sherman Antitrust Act. So it has to be pretty aggressive to violate a resale price maintenance agreement. Those are analyzed under the rule of reason. All right. So Section 2 is obviously the broader section of the Sherman Antitrust Act, and it allows for, of course, a single company or person can be held liable under Section 2. It doesn't take two to tango under this section. All right, and this relates to anybody who shall monopolize, i.e., has a monopoly, or attempt to monopolize, right? And so um, you don't necessarily have to have a monopoly. Any anti-competitive action can be actionable under Section 2. All right. The more narrow of the two kinds, and I like the example in the text um, where the ski lodge that controls the majority of the market share um, refuses to participate or withdraws from the participation in a joint ticket program with some other local ski lodges because they control the majority of the shares. So if they're not participating, what it means is that the smaller ski resorts are less likely to get any business, because if I'm coming to the area and wanted to sample a few, I'm just going to go with the larger company, most likely. That's refusal to participate, and that's the more narrow of the examples listed on the screen. But let's talk a little bit about predatory pricing. All right. It's easier to price in a predatory manner if you are the bigger, more established, better capitalized company. All right. And it goes like this. So, one company um, will sell product for lower than their price, lower than their cost, I should say. And that drives the business to that particular company. Now, their competitors have choices. They can try and meet that price. And if it's below cost, if they meet the price, they're going to go out of business. All right. Or they can not meet the price. And as a rational consumer making choices, I'm not going to support them because I know that I can get the same product for cheaper. All right. And so, in a matter of time, the non predatory pricing, the smaller entries, the smaller competitors in that market go out of business. And once that happens, the remaining company who had undercut its costs can now raise its costs without fear of competition. Obviously, that's anti competitive and it's very illegal. It's the most commonly prosecuted action under Section 2 of the Sherman Antitrust Act.